I mean, it's a simple question. It's a simple question. What is the problem with rogues? So here's something that has been growing a little bit recently within the community about the state of rogues right now in Season 2. Now, from an outside perspective, looking at rogues, it doesn't seem like nearly as terrible. First of all, here are the highest keys in Mythic Plus at this moment completed, and what do you know, there is a rogue in almost every key. Yes, technically, if we go and look at the most popular specs in Mythic Plus, rogue is actually the least popular class overall. They are beaten even by monk. As a matter of fact, with 2.2% of subtlety rogue making up the Mythic Plus player base, they are one of the least popular specs still. And overall, even in the higher keys, they have been slowly losing overall. In this week in particular, they are even below Fury. So they are actually third in popularity in Mythic Plus in the very high key levels. And that's just talking about subtlety. That's because Outlaw and Assassination are even lower. As a matter of fact, at this moment, even in all key levels, so we're not looking at the top keys, just everyone doing Mythic Plus, the least popular melee DPS spec is Assassination, and the third least popular melee DPS spec is Outlaw. If we were to put together the melee and the range DPS together, the least popular spec would still be Assassination, and Outlaw would still be the fourth least played spec. So that's the situation in Mythic Plus. What about the raid? Maybe they are a super meta class in the raid. You know, they make up for their lack in Mythic Plus in the raid. Well, at the moment, both Outlaw and Assassination are in the bottom 7 of popularity in the raid overall, and Subtlety, which is once again the one doing better out of the 3 specs, is just barely in the top 10 of popularity. And that still doesn't mean that their performance is massive, that the reason why they are very popular is because they are, very, very required. They are middle of the pack at the moment in Mythic raids. Now, some people, when I ask this question about rogues, will answer with this: I don't give a shit, fuck rogues, they have been meta, they have been super good either in the raid or in Mythic Plus or both for a very long time. Why should I care if rogue is not doing too well right now? We have, after all, previously been in Dragonflight in situations where all 3 of the rogue specs were doing very well. In particular, in the raid, initially, all 3 of the rogue specs were in the top 5, top 3, and then top 5, and then top 7, slowing down over time. And even in Mythic Plus, we had multiple periods where both Subtlety and Outlaw were at the top. So to many people, this situation isn't even a problem, Let's just roll with it. Let's just have, for once, rogues not being at the top of the food chain, right? Sort of like it happened, for example, for a while for mages. When after BFA, Fire Mage stopped being super dominant in the second half of Shadowlands and then into Dragonflight, Fire Mage wasn't doing too well, Arcane wasn't doing too well, and neither was Frost. That's sort of, many players might have thought that was okay because Mage had used to be very, very high up in popularity in both the raid and Mythic Plus, so everyone was like, whatever, who cares if for once they are not at the top. However, many rogues feel like asking for help for the state of their spec, not even just because they're not doing too much damage, not even because they are not very meta. It's more because of the state of their specs, because of the state of how their specs play. The options they have, the playstyle they have, the rotation they have, and the talents available to them to change their playstyle. That is more of the issue at the moment, and it happens to be happening for more or less all 3 of the specs. There are issues that even Blizzard acknowledged, like for example, isn't Assassination our long-standing traditional spec for doing single target damage? We have shit AoE, we have shit multi-target, we take a lot of time to ramp up with our bleeds and dots and poisons, but hey, once we get going, we have an unrivaled, an unparalleled single target. Well, this is a single target damage of an Assassination rogue on Magmorax, a pure single target fight, and Assassination is the 4th worst single target spec in the game. So, hold on a second, if we suck in AoE, if we suck in cleave, if our strength is supposed to be single target, then why are we still so bad in single target? What has made this a little bit worse as well was the comment from Blizzard pointing out that patch 10.1.5 was going to focus on the talents, was going to focus on the philosophy on some of the specs. This was, translated to, we are going to do a rework. We're going to be changing a few things, not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of talents, abilities, etc., etc. Now, we saw the results for now. We saw that they mentioned Holy Paladin, and we have been seeing plenty of huge changes for Holy Paladin planned for 10.1.5. We also saw them mentioning mages, and we did see many changes, in particular to Fire Mage and to Frost Mage, that are changing a lot of the spec, how the spec works. However, the other spec they mentioned in that list wasn't just Holy Paladin and mages, it was also rogues. Rogues were also supposed to be part of this list of big changes for 10.1.5, and at the moment we actually haven't seen anything in 10.1.5 aimed at rogues. As a matter of fact, despite them mentioning rogues being changed so far in 10.1.5, we have actually seen more changes to warlocks, more changes to devastation evokers, once again more changes to balanced druids, and we are still lacking the rogue changes. And I acknowledge, sure, it's always hard, right, to take these type of complaints seriously, because when they come from a privileged class, many players will just tell them to shut up. Right? Imagine a rogue complaining about the state of their class, and then you have a survival hunter saying, dude, you are complaining, what about me? Then you have, a feral druid, maybe a DK, maybe even before the rework to make them much better. Red Paladin, right? All of these melee specs which have been historically much less prevalent, much less important in the meta, right? They lived in the shadows. So the idea of imagining rogue being some sort of underappreciated and underseen spec and class from Blizzard feels a little bit funny, because generally speaking they have been very popular in throughout their lifetime. So it feels a little bit weird even now that we are complaining about the lack of changes to rogues. We still see subtlety being one of the more popular of the specs in the raid, and still one of the 3 most popular specs in Mythic Plus. So even from this position of being quite not given any attention from Blizzard, they are still able to have at least one spec to be very meta. So that is the crux at the moment on the situation on rogues. These specs are not playing too well, or they have issues with their talents or their rotations, whether it is subtlety or assassination or even outlaw. They would like to see some changes which are not coming at the moment, and it might be a little bit harder to be accepted or to be noticed by the community as having a problem, as having issues, because you have traditionally been popular, you have traditionally been strong. So whenever someone tries to cry over the state of your spec as a rogue, you are generally met with some type of, dude, deal with it. You are used to being popular. If for once you are not, it's not the end of the world. Which is more or less the same treatment other specs received when they stopped being super meta for a bit. This has happened before to other specs, so I was wondering what is the general consensus from the player base right now on rogues. Whether you still think there is still nothing wrong with having a couple of specs far below the average, as long as you have at least one spec in your class doing at least fine in terms of numbers, even if the spec itself might have some problems in terms of talents, in terms of rotations, etc., as long as you're doing well. As long as you're brought in the raid or brought in Mythic Plus, then it should still be fine for you as a player. Or maybe if you agree, maybe if you're a rogue player yourself and you would like to see more attention given to rogues to fix some of their issues. My answer is that personally I don't care. I am just being forced to make this video under blackmail by the rogue gang sponsoring this entire video, but maybe some of you have some different takes on what's going on with the situation with rogues at the moment. So, with this question left for you, we are going to be leaving each other here. So we are starting as usual the goodbyes to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help. to the channel. You can still support completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. And lastly, of course, you can still support by following me over on Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. So with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow. And in the meantime, I mean, yes, I feel bad for a bit, but then I remember all the seasons of BFA, all the seasons of Shadowlands, where rogues were like 30% of all the melee DPS, and then I feel much less bad.